So, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I'm pleased to welcome everyone on the third discussion panel of the International Scientific and Practical Conference, City as a Classroom 2020. We're about to start the conference panel dedicated to ongoing threats in the context of the city. I am Professor Vitalii Lunov, and it is an honor for me to be a moderator of this discussion panel. Let me please introduce our speakers. In the order they are given the floor to speak. Professor Oleg Maltsev is an author, criminologist, psychologist, photographer, investigative journalist. He is an academician of Ukrainian Academy of Sciences, founder and director of the Memory Institute, head of the Expeditionary Corps. He is also an author of numerous books in the areas such as applied history, sociology, depth ecology, philosophy, criminalistics, criminology. He has been conducting field research with the Expeditionary Corps in many countries for more than 6 years to explore of what levels and how people are shaped by cities. He is an editor of several interdisciplinary peer-reviewed journals. The next speaker is Eduardo Almeida. Is the CEO of Intra at Minside Brazil. He manages more than 8,500 specialists and has more than 25 years of professional experience in companies such as Alcatel, Cisco Systems, and Unisys. Previously, he served as the Vice President and General Manager for Unisys Corporation Latin America. You're welcome. The next speaker is Dwight Wilson, is the Guru of Filipino martial arts, martial artist with more than 20 years of experience, commissioned security officer, personal protection officer, private investigator, professional tracker. He is an author of 2 books, Wildness and Urban Survival, and United States Army veteran. You're welcome, Mr. Wilson. Dr. Ryan Bishop is an author, editor, critical theorist with an interest in urban studies, professor at the Winchester School of Arts, University of Southampton, United Kingdom, director of research and doctoral research within Winchester School of Art. He is co-editor of Cultural Politics, editorial member of the Theory Culture Society and other journals. You're welcome, Doctor. The next speaker is Avi Nardia. He is the martial artist, founder of the defense martial system Kapap. In the course of 24 years as the reserve officer, he has served as an official hand-to-hand instructor, safety officer, and served in the special counter-terror unit. He has also trained police agencies and armed forces all over the world, from police patrol and correction officers to SWAT, SRT, and CRT members, along with Army, Marine, and counter-terror units and special forces. And our next speaker is Professor Maxim Lepskiy. He is a doctor of philosophy, professor in sociology, chair of the Department of Sociology and Administration of the Zaporizhzhia National University. He is also the head of research board in social forecasting Sociological Association of Ukraine, academician of Ukrainian Academy of Sciences. So let me please deliver a few words about the format of this panel. Each speaker holds the opportunity to answer 2 questions formulated and presented to speakers in advance. Please limit the extent of answers up 7-8 minutes, no more. To begin with, I shall start the discussion of the first issue. Afterwards, each expert will have the opportunity to express his views on the second issue. Let me say several words about such minor but important aspect as breaks. You may grab a glass of water or use the washroom anytime you need. Just make sure your microphone is off. So, ladies and gentlemen, our honorable guests and our speakers, let me start our panel discussion. Let me remind the title of the given panel is ongoing threats in the context of a city. And the first question is it safe to reside in cities nowadays? And I give the floor to Professor Oleg Maltsev. You're welcome, Professor Maltsev.
Добрый вечер.
Good evening, dear colleagues.
Рад вас всех видеть.
I'm happy to greet everybody on this panel.
Думаю, что все ждали именно этой панели.
I believe that everybody was waiting for this panel, the 25th of August.
Я приветствую всех моих коллег.
And I also greet all of my colleagues that are on this panel and are watching this broadcast live.
Когда мы говорим о безопасной ли жизнь в городе, безопасности,
So when we speak about, is it secure to live in cities nowadays?
думаю, что большинство людей сегодня не имеют ни малейшего представления об этой проблематике.
I think most of the people nowadays, they do not have a clear understanding about this problematic.
Я занимаюсь в отрасли безопасности более 30 лет.
And I have been engaged in the security field for more than 30 years.
И на моих глазах прошла вся история безопасности за эти более чем 30 лет.
And in the course of more than 30 years, I have almost like a timeline of the history of security, its transformation and its all nuances.
И я работал в разных странах мира.
I've been conducting my activity in different countries
Защищая деловые круги.
by providing protection of high-class circles.
И так как я ученый,
And as an academic,
я как бы всегда к безопасности подходил как к науке.
I always approached security as if it is a science. I had a scientific approach to it.
То есть я считал всегда, что в основе безопасности должен лежать фундаментальный научный подход.
I always thought that in the foundation of security, we ought to have a scientific approach.
И когда, в общем-то, люди серьезно подходят к этой проблематике,
And when people take seriously what they are doing,
им бы было неплохо сначала изучить их предшественников.
certainly it would be logical to start from the history, what their predecessors did in this field.
То есть, как бы, по сути своей, я не хочу вам здесь дать учебную программу.
Certainly, I'm not about to give like a training program in this panel.
Больше хочу обратить внимание на некоторые детали, которые никто не замечает.
But I would like to turn attention to those minor details that are not noticed by many.
Обратите внимание, что начиная с 90-х годов,
If we pay attention that from 90s on,
безопасность деловых кругов, безопасность в городе, безопасность в государстве, частная безопасность граждан, она существенно претерпела изменения.
I mean, from 90s, I mean, it is an indisputable fact that the security, when it comes to certain business circle, when it comes to high-class circles, security, governmental, or even private security of citizens, it has transformed in many different ways.
То есть, по сути своей, раньше, чем ниже ты был в статусе, тем больше неприятностей у тебя было.
Basically, before, the lower your status was in the city, the less problems you had. I mean, the more problems you had.
Ну, то есть, как всем представляется это? То есть, богатые угнетали, мучили бедных, да?
I mean, the general average perception was if, like, bourgeois, like rich people were suppressing the lower classes.
То есть, чем ниже человек был в статусе, тем большая вероятность была, что с ним что-то случится.
Thus, the lower the status was of a person, the more, the higher was probability that something bad might happen with him.
То есть, ты бедный, несчастный, за тебя некому заступиться, и поэтому ты терпел все неприятности этого мира на себе.
So basically, the lower classes, they had no protection, they were alone, and they would get into different messy situations.
Окей. Сегодня ситуация поменялась крайне прямо да наоборот.
And when we speak about the current time, the situation became vice versa.
То есть, чем выше у тебя статус, тем больше у тебя неприятностей.
The higher a status has a person in the city, the more problems he has, the more vulnerable he is.
И вот этого переворота никто не заметил.
And this very transformation was not noticed by people.
Все по инерции считают, что все было так, как было до этого.
Because people just live, I mean, with this inertia, they keep on thinking the way things were before, and they just didn't pay attention to this transformation.
То есть моя практика безопасности, она была не только профессиональной, но и преподавательской.
And since my practice when it comes to security, it was not only a professional practical side, but also it was educational one, as I had to teach and train some people.
Я учил ученых.
I used to teach academics and scientists.
Я учил генеральных директоров.
I used to train main directors and CEOs of companies.
Я преподавал телохранителям.
I was training bodyguards.
И каждый раз, когда я начинал кому-то что-то преподавать, на меня все смотрели вот с такими вот глазами.
And every time I started teaching, everybody was, looking shocked and anxious.
Да, потому что им никому не приходило в голову, что к вопросу нужно подойти серьезно.
Because they just didn't take the subject seriously.
И в один прекрасный момент я прервал свою преподавательскую деятельность на 10 лет.
And at the certain point of time, I have stopped doing my educational teaching practice for 10 years. I stopped being involved in that.
Потому что мир начал кардинально меняться.
Because the world was, globally, it was just changing so much.
И я посчитал невозможным давать кому-то рекомендации, не проведя до этого фундаментальных научных исследований в этой области.
And I just thought that now, it would be impossible to consult and give recommendations to people without prior scrupulous scientific research of that field.
И вот несколько месяцев назад в португальской экспедиции
And very recently, several months ago, in the expedition which was held to Portugal,
я написал учебник по безопасности деловых кругов 21 века.
I wrote the textbook in that expedition, which was dedicated to the security of business circles in the 21st century.
Мне помогал и экспедиционный корпус, и профессор Lepskiy был со мной, выступал оппонентом этого учебника, как бы.
I was assisted to write that monograph by Expeditionary Corps, and Professor Maxim Lepskiy was in the role of an opponent to that book.
Ключевыми понятиями этого учебника стали временная переменная угроза.
And the key notions of the book were as follows.
Временная переменная угроза.
Permanent and not permanent threats.
То есть, по сути своей, если раньше мы классифицировали угрозы, у нас была шкала угроз некая.
And to show the difference, before we had a certain scale of different threats.
Мы их классифицировали определенным способом. То сейчас классификация угроз исчезла.
And as for today, we do not have the classification of those threats. It is irrelevant. It became irrelevant.
Возникла шкала негодяев вместо классификации угроз.
Instead of the classification of threats, what is more relevant is the scale of bad doers, things that are trying to, people that are a threat, basically.
То есть угрозы стали временными и переменными.
And basically all of the threats became temporary and the permanent, two kinds of them.
Возникли угрозы среды.
Also, what we have is that we have the threat of the environment itself.
Что это значит?
So here's what I mean by it.
То есть человек, он живет в определенной среде, и в этой среде появились собственные угрозы, которых раньше как бы не существовало, так называемая угроза среды.
So basically, we all live in different environments, and that a particular environment ended up having a particular types of threats that were not seen before.
И обратите внимание, что появились глобальные угрозы, которые касаются всех, чего раньше тоже не было.
And also what became more prevalent, the global threats that actually pertain to everybody in the world.
То есть, по сути своей, как бы пример тому нынешняя пандемия мировая, то, чего не было как бы до этого, это вот одна из разновидностей глобальных угроз.
And one of the kinds of these global threats is the recent COVID-19 pandemic, which is the perfect example of it.
И хочешь ты этого или не хочешь, касается тебя это, не касается, веришь ли ты в существование этой пандемии, не имеет никакого значения. Она прямо влияет на твою жизнь и твою деловую активность.
And as it turned out, it doesn't matter if people believe it or not, the existence of the pandemic, if people want to follow the rules or not. I mean, nothing matters. But what matters is that the situation, the global emergency, has affected every person in different ways.
И если меня сегодня спросили, какова главная проблема сегодняшней безопасности городов, это государство и правительство. Это самые опасные люди, которые существуют сегодня в государстве и в городах.
Государство и правительство.
Да, правительство этого государства и чиновники на местах. Это самые опасные люди, которые существуют.
And if I were asked to say what are the main threats of cities nowadays, to put it briefly and simply, my answer would be the following. The governmental structure in the cities and elected officials, the decisions they make are the main threats of today in the cities.
И вся их проблема заключается в том, что они абсолютно некомпетентны.
And the most important problem that they have is that they are incompetent.
Они же всего этого не знают.
I mean, they do not know all these things.
И у них даже алгоритмов каких-то им написанных сверху нет, как действовать в экстремальной ситуации.
And even, I mean, if we end up having an emergency situation just the way we did, they do not even have an algorithm of how they should act in situation as such.
Знаете, роботам пишут алгоритмы.
I mean, we all know that the machine, the robot, it would have an algorithm.
А вы представьте себе роботов без алгоритмов.
And if you now imagine robots that do not have algorithms.
Представьте себе, что будет делать робот, когда у него нет программного обеспечения.
Just imagine hypothetically for a minute what a robot without operation system and algorithm, what it would do.
И вы видели, как они действовали в условиях пандемии в Европе.
And everybody clearly saw how Europe behaved during the pandemic.
И они насмешили весь мир.
And it was, when it comes to specific countries, it was ridiculous.
И, в общем-то, до этого они меня смешили в Европе, когда они боролись с терроризмом, проверяя документы у граждан.
One ridiculous case before that was when they were trying to control and to examine all passports of citizens and airports, trying to combat terrorism, which was funny for me.
Какому террористу придет в голову быть с плохими документами в Европе? Как вы думаете?
Just to explain why that was ridiculous is, which terrorist would not have proper documents if he's trying to make a terroristic act in the city?
Нашли какого-то террориста?
I mean, did they find a terrorist after those procedures?
Нет.
No, they didn't.
Расстрел в Макдональдсе в Мюнхене.
Also, one of the horrible situations happened in Munich when a lot of people were shot in McDonald's.
Погибли 18 человек.
18 people were murdered.
Во Франции на Елисеевских полях грузовики давили людей, и все на это спокойно смотрели.
In France, when lorries were just killing and smashing people, nobody did anything.
Когда взрывали брюссельский аэропорт, тоже все были удивлены, почему он взорвался. Это ужасно. Как же он мог взорваться? Он же не должен был взорваться.
When Brussels airport was blown up, everybody was very surprised. How come it happened? I mean,
в Украине заложников закладывают по расписанию каждую неделю.
In Ukraine, it's like a schedule. They have a schedule when they take hostages every time.
Да, скоро в Украине это превратится в национальный спорт.
And just as a joke, I think soon in Ukraine, taking people by hostage might turn into a national sport.
Как вы думаете, опасно сегодня жить в городе или нет?
So, I mean, after looking at all these things, do you guys think, is it safe to live in the city or not?
То есть пока люди не поймут, что все сильно поменялось, пока к этому не будет применено фундаментальное научное знание, пока не будут работать над этой проблематикой специалисты, пока не научат людей бороться с этими угрозами и управлять этими угрозами, это будет продолжаться бесконечно и иметь только тенденцию к увеличению.
So, unless people understand that everything has transformed when it comes to security in a drastic manner, unless people will have real professionals dealing with this problem and knowing how to act in emergency situations, all these cases are going to be just increasing in their numbers day by day.
Да, и обратите внимание, что мы с профессором Луневым написали книгу вам, как нас заставили изучать психологию как бы Европы, где эти все угрозы, все представлены в полном объеме. И я думаю, что если вы не добрались до этой книги, до этой монографии, прочитайте, вам станет все понятно.
And so one more point, recently me and Professor Lunov, who is moderating this conference, we wrote a monograph which is titled How I Was Forced to Study the Psychology of Europe. So that monograph clearly demonstrates what kind of threats are there today in the world and how people are incapable of dealing with them. And it's a very illustrative book that I would really recommend to read.
Как вы думаете, сколько государственных чиновников построилось в очередь, чтобы прочитать эту книгу?
And so how many elected officials that are responsible for dealing with emergency situations did read the monograph as such?
Думаю, ни одного, 0.
I think nobody did.
Как вы думаете, сколько прочитала книгу, которую я написал «Безопасность 21 века»?
How many people read the book that was written about security in 21st century?
Я вам скажу сколько, 0.
0.
Знаете, почему никто не хочет читать эти книги?
And the reason people do not want to read those books is as follows.
Я вам скажу, потому что это все не нужно.
Because nobody needs that. They do not feel the necessity to educate themselves.
Вокруг должно быть опасно.
Because environment where we live is supposed to be dangerous. Has to be dangerous.
Никто не собирается бороться ни с какими угрозами.
Nobody is really intends to combat different threats.
Все должны привыкнуть. Спасение утопающих – дело рук самих утопающих.
People should get used to that the salvation of a person is in the hand of the person himself, as Nietzsche would have said.
И когда Бодрияр писал в свое время, что вам придется выбирать между свободой и безопасностью,
and if we take a Baudrillardian perspective in here, that if you have to choose between security and freedom,
один из американских президентов сказал, что тот, кто ставит эту пропорцию, не достоин ни свободы, ни безопасности.
We could think of the quote of one of the presidents of the United States of America who said that if a person proportionalizes this thing, if he tries to choose between security or freedom, he deserves none of them.
Я прошу прощения коллег за эмоциональное выступление. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Great, thanks, Academician Maltsev, for your speech, for your experience. And I'd like to give the floor to Eduardo Almeida. Please, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Vitalii. It's an honor for me to be part of this distinguished group and share a little bit some perspectives about if it's safe to reside currently in cities nowadays. I've been traveling a lot, more than 50 countries in the last 20 years, and experiencing the sensation of safe in different manners. Let me start by just putting a very big statement now. You know, absolute safe is utopia. It's very impossible to be safe. Absolutely, by all means. So you can define what kind of safe we are flexible enough to understand and to adopt. Now, the understanding of threats is the most important thing that we can realize when it comes to city safety. There are basically two different types of threat that we've been working in the region in Latin America in the last years. So when we talk about physical threats, there are countries that are more prepared than others, cities that are more prepared than others. And just seeing one of the statements of UN, United Nations, about urban life, we learned that by 2050, 2050, more than 66% of the global population will live in urban areas. So the concern and the dedication to improve public safety in cities should be part of any serious government, any serious society. Now, I was talking about physical threats. There are regions where you simply cannot go unless you want to be hijacked or you want to be kidnapped if you're not part of a guerrilla or things like this. And some societies have evolved enough to ban this kind of approach. But now we have a different type of threat. We have the digital threat. So basically, when it comes to population, depending on the profile of the citizen, one threat will be more relevant than other. So if we consider, for instance, my 20 years old daughter, she's studying in a medical school now. She's much more concerned about digital threats than physical threat, living the lifestyle she lives, because digital threats became part of crime that is becoming more and more frequent in cities, but not only cities. I mean, cities because cities have the most connected people. So one of the assumptions that we can consider when we talk about cities is the possibility to connect and to become digital in this new world. And then you have a different kind of unsafe. You have digital crimes, you have cyber terror, you have identity thefts, you have frauds, and you have other types of threats that will certainly make you feel insecure when connecting digitally. Now, when it comes to some other countries or some other cities where you have addressed certain aspects of digital security and also physical security, then you have a different type of threat. You have the natural threats. So you may have hurricanes, you have earthquakes, you have social problems, including lootings, riots, and other situations that is becoming more and more frequent in some big cities across the world. So to the point that is it safe or not to reside in cities, it is a major call out to public authorities to think about security in a more broader way. Now, if I am to move to a city looking for security, I should consider seriously if this city has, for instance, a crisis management officing. So are we prepared as a city to digital threats, to physical threats? Are we exposed to natural threats? So what kind of security do my population aspire today and in the future? How we as a society, we manage these different types of threat to make our city more secure every day. So to the point that answering is it safe to live in a city nowadays? Of course, it is much more safe to live in a city in Austria than in Afghanistan. It depends on how willing or your will to take risks. What's your risk appetite and how flexible you are to understand the different safety criteria that are around this decision. Moving to a city and considering the safety of the city is different depending on the standard of the population. For a beggar, for instance, the concept of safe is completely different for a middle-class citizen, right? So a beggar will be much more concerned about food provisioning, health provisioning, than, for instance, looting or kidnapping or any kind of other disturbs that is becoming more and more frequent in bigger cities. So I believe that by taking this assumption from UN that by 2050, 66% of the population will live in urban areas, authorities must do something about safe cities and think about safety, and not only as a very punctual or more sporadic thing, but also as a broader approach, and treat safety in a more wide range of approach. So natural, physical, digital, and having a strategy for each of these different threats will make certainly the society better. So this is my comment, Vitalii. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eduardo, for your concept and for your speech. And let me ask and let me to give the floor to Dwight Wilson, please. You're next.
Okay, thank you. I sometimes talk too much, so please cut me off when you need to.
Okay.
Okay. I like your talk about the digital threat. It's definitely out there. One of the things that I am looking at and following right now and have been in the last few years in the security industry is social media and the effect of social media on a population. I'm sure it's gone all over the news on the world. I don't know, but we've had a lot of rioting going on. Just this past Sunday, we had two police officers that shot a young man in the back while he was trying to get into his car. That happened at 5 p.m. By 8 p.m., we already had large crowds and they already had looting and rioting and burning cars and all kinds of chaos happening in the city. So that's how fast social media could organize people for that kind of a threat to happen. So you're talking about tens of thousands of people sometimes that can be organized literally within hours now. Actually faster than the police can get people there to help stop the threat. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm seeing as a new threat is social media. And what you do about it, I have no idea. I don't, especially here in the United States, freedom to assemble, freedom to protest, but that doesn't include rioting and burning and looting and social chaos and violence, but also freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, freedom to air your grievances against your government. That's all good. So do you regulate social media? I don't know. I think it is something that in the security industry, I'm definitely watching, because I can have a client post something on social media, leave Los Angeles airport. By the time they fly to Chicago, they're already facing a threat because of something that they may have tweeted on Twitter, and it gone viral just in a matter of hours. So that can be a huge threat. It just shows to me the pace of what technology is doing. So looking at cybercrime, looking at all of those threats, social media is definitely something that I feel is changing the security environment. Of course, we still have the physical threats and everything else that's going on. But like with the COVID-19, we saw an immediate panic, especially here in the United States. And for some reason, I don't really know why, everybody bought toilet paper. I guess everybody was going to need to use the restroom an awful lot. I don't know. But that was something that just happened. And why that panic happened, I don't know, but you do see it. And so the effect of the media, the social media, a lot of these problems that I'm seeing also is disinformation. So you're getting information sent out, you're getting bad information sent out because of the rush to get information through the media, that a lot of times it's bad information, and sometimes it's just what we call a disinformation campaign. Somebody is purposely sending out false information. So that's just kind of what I'm seeing in the course of threats, or at least changing threats, new threats that are coming out. With this election cycle that's coming up, I know that in 2016, there was a lot of people talking about Russia's involvement in our election here in the United States. Nobody needed to really, all it needed to do is put together a funny meme that would go viral, and that could have affected the election. It's as simple as that. As a matter of fact, it got so bad in 2015, I wrote this in my paper. In 2015, there was foreign influence through memes, through social media and Facebook, of an Operation Jade Helm, which took place as a military training exercise here in the United States. Okay, it got so bad, and the memes were so bad that the governor of the state of Texas activated the Texas State Guard in order to watch the United States military, because they thought that they were going to have declare martial law. That's the power of social media. That's them influencing, people influencing our politicians, our elected officials, everything, even the way we do business. Social media has definitely changed things. I don't know how you guys feel about that. It's just something that I'm watching. I'm also seeing, because of that, I'm seeing the rise of private intelligence companies. So you have basically a private central intelligence agency, collecting intelligence, collecting data, both digitally and physically. So just kind of what I wanted to put out there. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, dear Dwight, for your presentation, and we give the floor to Professor Ryan Bishop.
Thank you, everyone, and good to join you, and I appreciate the invitation to be here. I'll keep my thoughts relatively brief on this particular topic about whether or not people are safe, if it's safe to live in cities or not. I guess in relation to that question, I would give an unequivocal yes and no. It's never been safe to dwell in cities, although that's the original and continued rationale for city formation, that is safety. Cities exist primarily as sites of protection, developing as they did as fortified sites at crossroads of trade. Those same forces of wealth accumulation and control, flows of people and power, defense and protection remain in greater scales today than they did in antiquity, of course. However, they nonetheless persist, even after the 20th century exposed the city to what some urban studies people call urbicide, that is, city killing on a mass scale, through 2 world wars. Aerial bombing as a legitimate mode of military activity, which didn't take place until the Second World War, to the global targeting of all of the world's major cities for mass simultaneous incineration during the Cold War, and on into the asymmetric warfare of terrorist attack and the live televisual destruction of the Gulf War and the Iraq War. In spite of over a century of an all-out assault in the city, of mass demolition and reconstruction, we perpetuate a linear discourse about cities as spatial containers of progress. And this discourse persists in spite of the evidence of well over 100 years. So my own research has been connected to a nexus between the militarization, or one strand of my research, connects the nexus between the militarization of everyday life and its imprimatur in the built environment, and the collective imaginary of city dwellers, the way the material world influences the immaterial, and how the immaterial, the noetic world, influences and shapes the material world. This research took shape in a very specific manner in a chapter that I wrote prior to 9/11 called The City as Target. And to think about the city in terms of a target is to think about it in terms of something that we both aim at and shoot for. So urban inhabitants are taught really early on, explicitly and covertly, that they are in the crosshairs of desire, of yearning, of envy, of opportunity, of failure, loss, and violence. And that much of the city's armature results through these conceptualizations of the city. Risk is an inherent part of city life, as is violence at all scales. Violence, trauma, and catastrophe, though, are inescapable dimensions of the city. which targeting reveals as something other than an unconscious fetish of civilization. That is, the belief that violence and catastrophe are somehow external to urban existence rather than being constitutive of it. So perhaps this configuration of the city as target is worth revisiting now, especially when we consider, as has already been mentioned, the two major threats to civilian urban populations in most parts of the world at the moment. And these are climate crises and the pandemic. The pandemic harkens back to early strategies for storming cities. Using disease and pestilence to wreak havoc behind fortified walls is an ancient strategy. Much of what targets the city in the current moment comes in what is called in the intelligence communities blowback, which is defined as unintended consequences of political or economic or military actions that adversely affect the instigator of the actions. The city has unintentionally targeted itself in the dual threats of pandemic and climate crises. Rather than a myopic vision of urban centers as sites of progress, growth, and development, a reconsideration what we collectively are aiming at speaks to us with some urgency. Each of the current crises results from unshakable beliefs in agency and control that is essential to urban surveillance and urban oversight. The current conditions and crises that we are experiencing reveal that humility and openness to alterity and diversity is required if the urban is to be perpetuated. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, dear Professor Bishop, for your presentation, for your speech, and let me give the floor to Avi Nardia. Please, you're welcome.
Hello to everyone. I want to discuss a few things because I hear you and I'm trying not to cross some things that already I think made very clear, but I agree about the survival between rich to poor is different, and that's why we will see also between poor countries like Afghanistan, Africa, maybe different results. Also, maybe they don't count poor people, they die, while in a wealthy country like Austria or Germany, we count everyone. So the thing is that about the survival, about low class or high class, and the risk for each of them is different. While, by the way, mostly poor people many times cannot live in towns or in big cities. And then it's created different thing that you can see in the US, that the poor people and the homeless, they live in the city, in the downtown, and the wealthy people will go back outside to the scars of the city. I think we also need, when we talk about survival in a city, between the survival of the subject himself, of one human, or like me, Avi, or my business, because it could be that I will survive, but my business not, and that will change the game later on when we're back to the life again. I think that the key to survive is start and end in the ability to improvise and to have an open mind. And people that are connected and say, I'm a barber or I'm a martial artist, or they might find themselves that they cannot flow with the new wave and the new, it's like me, I forced myself to study about digital, about cyber, about phones and the use of the computers. I want to talk about another thing. By the way, I'm not going to give any conclusion because I think each needs to make his own conclusion how he is going and what is more risk for him, the city or not to be in the city. My opinion, the city for sure will survive, but it don't mean that the people in the city will survive their businesses or the way that they live. I want to also emphasize between survival, because we mentioned survival. There's a big difference between survival to camping. And many times when I do survival seminars, they say, bring a shovel, bring a tent. That's not survival, that's camping. Survival is, I give you what you got. Like, this is the situation. You have only knife, now you have to survive. Or you don't have a water, or you do have water, you have a lake, you don't have a lake. And people that cannot improvise and study to survive really, they might be sometimes talking about survival, but and by the way, urban survival is different than survival in desert or in Arctic or whatever. Of course, we can mention the dinosaurs, that they will not be adapted ability to the new life, and that's why we don't see any more dinosaurs. We have a joke that, you know, it's a caricature, and you see homeless, and the homeless says, how did Corona didn't attack us? And they said, because we don't watch TV. Many times, if we didn't hear about Corona, about all the media, maybe we will not know so much about Corona. And I have a friend that's selling a yacht, and they've been like 4 months in the sea. And only 4 months later, when they land, they understand that there is a Corona. So again, maybe outside, if you take a boat or an island, you have better way to survive, but still you need a city to come and load food. And I want to talk about a few things about, maybe we have a mega attack, because what is a mega attack? Let's start, what is a terror? Terror is a fear. If you fear from Corona, then it's a terror attack. Just not with demolition, but it's like a bio, and we are under terror attack, and we are having a mass casualties, at least by the news. And of course, we need to deal with it like a mass casualty. And the first principle is triage. Who are the people in a risk the most? Maybe the old people, and how we can run our life and not to lose the city, not to lose the functions of the city and the function of the jobs. And we need to make like triage and put priorities. Maybe even governments afraid to admit that they got panic too much. And maybe the whole Corona is a false flag. You know, in the 1960s, they already want to do Operation Northwood as a black flag, as a fake sabotage, like attack to create situation. So we don't know, but I would look at Corona as a mega attack on cities, because the cities are on the most risk, the economy is on the most risk. And I think this is one of the main ideas that Putin told the American, you might be on the moon, but we have the first vaccination. And this is like, again, like we're back to the Cold War between mega power governments. So Putin ran with a vaccinate. And when I mentioned that it might be a terror attack, because we're all afraid, so it's a terror attack. And I'm wondering, what is terror? You know, when you talk sometimes with terrorists, they blame us, the Western, with the terrorism. They say that our government is a terrorism. So those things are questionable. And in my opinion, the real virus is corruption and starving. And we all know what I'm talking about, because the world is starving. And it will starve more, because even the people that were not under starving, we are going to be starved. A lot of people already losing jobs, a lot of people that don't work for the governments. That's why you can see that the people that work with the governments, they're ready to beat you up just because you don't have a mask. And not to mention that this mask, it's like you put a yarmulke on the head, or you put, I need the glasses, but let's say that you just put the glasses like this. It's not effective. The mask cannot work more than 2 hours. It's already, it has a time limit. People walk with masks like dirty underwear for 1 month, and they don't change it. So in my opinion, if you live in a city, you have better hospitals, you have most doctors. So in a one way, you can maybe get a better treatment, unless again we go to triage. And you know, if you don't have enough money, it will be hard for you to get the best treatment. And rich people always have money, and they can always get all the medical in a better way. They will be before you on a line to surgery. So if you're rich, maybe in a big city, it will help you. But on the same thing, it might open you to looting. And you could see in the US that a lot of people, instead of buy, they run to buy toilet paper and they run to buy guns and ammo. When we in Europe buy food and water, because we can eat, we can drink, and that's good. We will wait. So that's my opinion, that the survivals of the city depend, and it's different from one to another. There's no, maybe for you, it even will be a benefit that after Corona, you will be very rich. Like people that became rich after the Second World War, the Second World War. Germany, look at their economy after the Second World War today. They did such a big success, and some countries that their economy just go down. So it's a big challenge for cities, but I think it's a big challenge to individuals, and the people that will open mind, they are the people that are going to survive in a better way and to actually success even from the Corona time. And for the city, I'm not worried. The city will be there, even if there will be atomic and everyone will disappear. The city will be there. The city is a structure, and people need a city structure for getting a better survival. So
thank you, Dr. Nardia, for your opinion, for your speech. And let me give the floor to Professor Maxim Lepskiy. You're welcome, dear Professor.
Я хочу поприветствовать всех участников нашей панели.
First of all, let me please greet all the participants of our panel.
И хочу поделиться своими размышлениями по этому поводу.
And sure enough, I would like to share my viewpoints and representations concerning the topic of the panel.
Моя диссертация PhD была связана с проблемой выживания.
First of all, my PhD dissertation was connected, the topic was connected with the problems and aspects of survival.
И с моим другом мы делали в течение 10 лет передачи «Школа выживания. Городские джунгли».
Moreover, for more than 10 years, Professor Lepskiy, together with his friend, was shooting a series of videos concerning, let me say, how the person survives in urban jungles.
Изучали политические риски на уровне города и области, когда пришлось поработать в обладминистрации.
Moreover, Professor Lepskiy was also researching the political risks that actually occur both in the city and in, let me say, state area, right on the time when Professor Lepskiy was a government official elected.
Но мое теоретическое восприятие проблем, угроз перевернулось после курса, который был связан с португальской экспедицией.
However, the total representation of Professor Lepskiy concerning the threats was, let me say, turned upside down, like by the tornado, and that happened right in the scientific expedition that took place in Portugal.
Когда мы столкнулись с ситуацией пандемии, мы увидели разные двигатели этой ситуации.
Having faced the pandemic situations, we actually witnessed different motors and different catalysts for this situation.
Первый, конечно, был медицинский, и о нем я говорить сейчас не хочу.
The first catalyst actually was the medical one, but right now Professor Lepskiy is not going to speak about that.
Второе, естественно, то, что можно сейчас называть инфопандемией.
The second, as natural as it is, actually is the pandemic's factor that we call the informational one.
Поскольку постоянное тиражирование одних и тех же посылов создавало определенные психологические и моральные угрозы.
Since certain information and data concerning pandemics was, let me say, viral one, this viral information was scoping over and over the world.
Это было связано с экзистенциальным кризисом, то есть опорами существования человека.
And Professor Lepskiy believes this was tightly connected with existential crisis. The fundamental pillars on which the representation of person collapsed in a psychological way.
перестали доверять религии, поскольку праздники религиозные можно было отменить.
And actually people stopped trusting religions because pandemics showed and demonstrated to everyone in the world that religious fasts and certain days, they couldn't be just banned.
Человек перестал доверять науке, потому что информационная пандемия оказалась сильнее.
Moreover, the person stopped believing the scientific approaches as well because, well, again, pandemics showed itself from the stronger side, as if it was more powerful than the science.
Человек перестал доверять себе, потому что угроза якобы невидима.
Moreover, Professor Lepskiy speaks that the person even stopped trusting himself because the threat of pandemics, this is the invisible type of threat.
Человек перестал доверять правительству, потому что действия не приводили к разрешению ситуации, а накаливанию ситуации.
Moreover, the person stopped believing the representatives of his government or his states because these representatives, they were incompetent enough and it didn't matter what they tried to do, this never helped.
Опоры существования были подорваны, и у человека появилось большое напряжение, прежде всего психологическое.
And psychologically, we should say that the psychological existing pillars, they just collapsed. And this produced huge wave of pressure that actually was like a storm upon the psyche of the people.
Отсюда мои коллеги написали монографию по поводу психологии Европы и почему ее необходимо было изучать в глобальных угрозах.
Having faced this situation, having analyzed the factors of it, the colleagues of Professor Lepskiy, who are actually present during this conference, they produced a monograph concerning the reasons of this situation. The title of the monograph is Why I Was Forced to Study the Psychology of Europe.
Одновременно происходит гиперреальная подмена понятий.
At the same time, we witness the hyper-reality swift change of the notions. I mean, the meanings of the notions are changing just in a tremendous swift way.
Говорят о увеличении физического дистанции, хотя обзывают это понятием социальная дистанция. Социальное – это отношение между людьми.
Moreover, physically we're getting, let me say, there is more and more distance growing between the people. And actually, this is not the physical distance, this is the social distance affected.
А вот социальная дистанция действительно разрывается во многих семьях и в профессиональной деятельности.
Moreover, the social distance is actually being torn apart, both concerning the family situation and the professional activity situation.
Одновременно вторичным поражающим фактором является снижение обучения и профессиональной компетентности людей в глобальной угрозе.
The second subdominant factor concerns the decrease of the education as it affects the personal psychological situation too.
Кроме этого, я считаю, что значительными угрозами в городе становится проблематика мультисетевая, потому что город – это многоинфраструктурная часть, много сетей. И любая из этих сетей может оказаться под ударом глобальной угрозы.
Moreover, Professor Lepskiy believes that one more problem we've witnessed today is the problem concerning the multi-communicative net. Professor Lepskiy thinks that an urban area consists of various nets. And if we face some sort of global threat, it affects various nets tied in the city and making it work as one organism.
И ставятся задачи в обучении теперь совершенно другие, но пока эти программы не разрабатываются в школе и не применяются.
Moreover, if we're speaking about, let me say, making programs, I mean, the programs for educating children, adolescents, and grown-ups, we should say that the tasks for these educational programs, they are new. However, the methodologies are not new, and these programs are not fulfilled yet.
И я абсолютно согласен с моим другом и коллегой Олегом Викторовичем Мальцевым о том, что некомпетентность государственных органов становится ключевой угрозой в нынешней ситуации.
Furthermore, Professor Lepskiy completely takes the point of Dr. Maltsev concerning the fact that actually the government elected officials' incompetence is the key threat of this, let me say, total situation.
Поскольку медицинская проблема тиражируется в экономику и в политику.
Moreover, the medical aspect of the problem is scoping in political and economic fields.
В результате происходит масштабирование и глобализация вторичных факторов поражения.
As a result, we see that these problems right now in economic and political ways, they are scoping furthermore on the level of the world. And this leads to disaster.
Поэтому, очевидно, единственный призыв, который может быть, это призыв к ученым объединять усилия в изучении этих вопросов. И первый шаг сделан экспедиционным корпусом.
And Professor Lepskiy definitely believes that the real slogan and the real, let me say, cry of activity would be to say that scientists and scholars should work together. They should collaborate in order to find the decent decision to all these problems.
Потому что повестка дня средств массовой информации может переключать с одного вируса на другой, на третий, четвертый, потому что этот ряд, он достаточно широк, если не бесконечен.
Moreover, the media environment shows us today that actually our attention and our focus can be switched off, let me say, in a very swift way. So this is the reason we have to be persistent and we have to collaborate persistently on a specific topic for finding the decision.
Спасибо за внимание. Это те тезисы, с которыми я хотел познакомить коллег.
So thank you so much for your kind attention. These were the ideas and the concepts produced by Professor Lepskiy.
Great, thanks, dear Professor Lepskiy, for your speech. And dear colleagues, we should know that the first question ends here, and I like to propose to all of you the second question to our discussion. The second question was risk categories in the context of a city, different categories of people, and different risk categories. And let me remind about 7-8 minutes for speech. So let me give the floor to academic Maltsev. You're welcome, dear Professor Maltsev.
Спасибо огромное, потерпите меня немножко.
Thank you very much. Please bear with me.
Начнем с угрозы среды.
So let's start with the threat of the environment.
Я думаю, сейчас вы кое-что поймете.
And I would like to share now very understandable things for everybody.
Я приведу вам 3 примера.
I will give 3 examples
С разных точек мира.
from different parts of the world.
Как-то меня угораздило поехать в Нью-Йорк.
Once, I was on a business trip to New York.
Я именно это хотел сказать, то есть никаких смягчений акцентов. Именно угораздило, потому что нормальный человек в Нью-Йорк поехать не может.
I ended up being in the New York for some reason because a normal, healthy person would not be there.
То есть я это понял, когда приехал в Нью-Йорк.
And I understood that when I stepped my feet to New York land.
И я как нормальный, обыкновенный человек, так как у меня были дела в Нью-Йорке, когда у меня высвободилось какое-то время небольшое.
And once I had some free leisure time while being there.
Я хотел посмотреть статую свободы.
I wanted to visit the Statue of Liberty.
Как обыкновенный турист.
Just as a regular, normal tourist.
Что такое Нью-Йорк?
When we say what is New York,
Это же цвет нации.
for people it's just the flower of nations.
Это же совершенно безопасный город.
It's believed to be a completely safe city.
То есть в Нью-Йорке каждый человек себя чувствует в абсолютной безопасности.
In New York, every person is supposed to feel him absolutely invulnerable.
И когда я пришел для того, чтобы просто пойти посмотреть статую свободы, первое, что со мной сделали, это уперли в мою грудь штурмовую винтовку М4.
So once, as I've said, just as a regular person, I went to the Statue of Liberty, and the first thing that they did to me, they put in my breast the assault rifle M4.
То есть сумасшедший американский полицейский упер в меня штурмовую винтовку и сказал, что он хочет посмотреть мои вещи.
So a crazy American police, he put this assault rifle, directed it to me and said that he wants to look through my bags.
США — это же самая демократическая страна в мире.
But how come U.S. is considered to be the most democratic country in the world?
То есть я был очень удивлен, что мне, обыкновенному человеку, нужно объясняться с полицейским, потому что я хочу посмотреть на достопримечательности.
So it was very strange to me that as a regular, just a normal person, in order to see that monument, I had to explain myself to a policeman.
Пример номер 2.
So now we go to the example number 2.
Самое ужасное место на Земле.
The most horrible and terrifying place on earth.
Палермо.
Palermo.
Там живет самая страшная организация в мире — мафия.
It is believed that the most, horrifying organization resides there, which is Mafia, Palermo.
Очень многие из моих коллег были со мной в Палермо.
A lot of colleagues of mine visited that place together with me.
Мы в 3 часа ночи ходили по городу, сидели в ресторанах, смотрели достопримечательности, посещали культовые учреждения, и никто нам не задавал никаких вопросов вообще.
And we were totally free to walk around at 3 a.m. in Palermo. We went to the restaurants, we went sightseeing. We just had a walk and nobody asked us even one single question.
Где опаснее, в Нью-Йорке или в Палермо?
So, which place is more dangerous? Is it New York or Palermo?
Окей. В определенный момент времени мы в Палермо снимали фильм.
So there was one moment when we had to shoot a movie in Palermo.
И там есть трущобы, куда люди вообще не ходят, потому что там тебя убьют, ограбят и так далее и тому подобное.
And there are certain slums type of regions that are quite dangerous and people do not go there because they are told that they will be robbed and killed, etc.
И когда я входил в эти трущобы, женщина кричала: не ходите туда, вас там ограбят.
And when I was just entering that area, one woman was screaming from her house, do not go there, you're going to be robbed.
И я ей сказал: не волнуйтесь, сеньора, я дома, все будет хорошо.
And I said, please do not worry, senora, I'm at home, everything would be fine with me.
Да, она была очень удивлена, у нее были вот такие глаза.
And she was certainly very surprised to that answer.
Ну и теперь третий пример, самый интересный.
And this was the second example, and the third example, the most interesting one.
Жуткое место.
Terrifying place.
Где все люди ходят с оружием, вооруженные до зубов.
Where all people are armed, totally armed.
Я говорю о штате Техас.
And I'm speaking about Texas state.
Где все злодеи мира живут одновременно.
Supposedly, Texas is just a flourishing place of all bad guys.
Более спокойно я не чувствовал себя никогда в жизни.
I have never felt myself calm and more secure. I've never felt like this, but just in Texas. It was just so calming and just so tranquil.
Ну, очень многие люди, наверное, скажут, что ты гулял с Двайтом, поэтому, наверное, ты такой спокойный.
Probably many people would say, you've been wandering around in Texas with Dwight, that's why you felt yourself very safe.
Ну, Двайт нас на ночь оставлял.
But Dwight would leave us alone at night. He would just go to his place.
И нам ночью было очень спокойно. И до Академии, до Федерации филиппинских воинских искусств мы добирались самостоятельно, и нам тоже было очень спокойно.
And even at night, it felt, it was fine. It was very calm, and we would just commute on our own for the first time in Texas till the Academy of Filipino Martial Arts Federation, just on our own.
Эти три примера показывают,
So these three examples, simple examples, show the following.
Что люди живут во сне.
that people, in fact, they are living in a dream.
Как говорил Бодрияр в гиперреальности.
If we speak in Baudrillardian language, then people are living in hyper reality.
И они считают опасным то, что безопасно.
So the problem is that people consider the dangerous thing to be not dangerous.
И считают безопасным то, что жутко опасно.
And people consider to be safe the thing which is really dangerous.
Я всегда на лекциях приводил один и тот же пример.
So on the specific lectures, I always give one single example.
На чем безопаснее ходить в море? На кораблях, которые перевозят газ?
I always asked, what is the most secure way you to be in the sea or in the ocean? Is it on the ship, which is carrying a gas?
Или на кораблях, которые перевозят грузы, контейнеры там, ну, всякие?
Or is it safer to be on the ship, which is transporting different cargo?
Ответ, по-моему, очевиден. Самое опасное – это газ.
Certainly, obviously, the answer is, I mean, it's obvious because the most dangerous place would be a ship with a gas.
Но найдите мне хоть одну катастрофу с кораблем, который перевозит газ.
Now, the question is the following. Could you even name one catastrophe that would be related to the ship with a gas?
Вряд ли вы сможете привести хоть один пример.
It is less likely that you will find at least one example.
Что касается остальных кораблей, нажимаете кнопки в интернете, у вас будет прямо целая история катастроф.
As for the other type of ships, you will have, I mean, the whole chronicle of different disasters that have happened to
И особенно это касается пассажирских лайнеров.
And that's especially relevant to like normal, regular passengers liners.
Нам кажется, что перевозка газа это опасно.
We think that gas transportation is something dangerous.
А выясняется, что нет, это совершенно безопасная вещь. А вот Титаник и прочие суда нам показали, что путешествие в море на круизном лайнере это не совсем безопасно.
But in fact, it turns that gas, the ship which is transporting gas is quite safe because people they know the responsibility and I mean, it's very safe. And the cruise liners that are related to travels, even let's say the most famous movie Titanic, we all know what could happen to a liner like that.
Весь мир борется с терроризмом.
Whole world is trying to combat terrorism.
Никому в голову не приходит, что ни одна террористическая организация не способна себя финансировать.
And nobody even thinks that none of the terrorist organizations in the world are capable of financing themselves.
Вы представляете, сколько нужно денег для того, чтобы содержать террористическую организацию?
If we, just try to imagine how much money would one need to finance terrorist organization.
То есть эти люди денег не зарабатывают.
Those people, they do not earn money by themselves.
Они только тратят деньги.
They only spend money.
Откуда же столько террористических организаций?
So where from do we have so many terrorist groups?
Вероятно, существуют инвесторы, которые их содержат.
Probably there are investors that do finance them.
И у меня такое впечатление складывается, что существует негласная договоренность по всему миру, что каждый должен иметь собственную террористическую организацию.
And it seems to me that in the world there is like an agreement which is, not said verbally, that every, entity should have its own terrorist organization.
И раз у тебя есть террористическая организация, значит, и у меня должна быть собственная террористическая организация.
If one has a terrorist organization, then the other entity should also necessarily have his own terrorist organization.
И если уже какая-то террористическая организация уже особенно себя плохо ведет, тогда начинается разбирательство. Что же делать с этой террористической организацией?
And if one of the organizations is behaving really bad, very explicitly, then people start talking about, what should we do with that organization?
И никому в голову не приходит идея о том, что, уважаемые господа, это очень удобный способ терроризма решать государственные, политические и экономические вопросы, не участвуя самостоятельно в этом.
And not frequently people even think about that, having terrorist groups is a very convenient way for countries to solve the, different political issues of their own without being a direct player or participant of that.
Дело в том, что и политикам, и бизнесменам всем нужны террористы.
Politicians and many businessmen, they need terrorists.
То есть политикам для того, чтобы держать в повиновении свой народ.
When it comes to politics, well, they need the terrorist organizations to keep people in line.
Бизнесменам для того, чтобы бесплатно получать блага, за которые им пришлось бы платить огромное количество денег.
And as for the businessmen, they are happy when there are terrorist organizations because they can get certain things for free, things that they would never have done for free if there were not those organizations.
То есть это тема, на которую можно говорить бесконечно.
Basically, this topic is something that you can talk on and on.
Что нужно понять?
So here's what has to be understood.
Что спецслужбы должны научиться работать, не нарушая прав граждан.
That special intelligence services should learn how to work without violating human rights.
У нас как-то в последнее время, последние годы спецслужбы работают за счет граждан своих государств, за счет их неудобств, за счет их нарушения их прав.
In recent years, we see a tendency that a lot of intelligence services are working at the expense of their own people, at the expense of their inconvenience and other things.
Я в Мюнхене видел ситуацию.
In Munich, I saw a situation.
Идут какие-то люди по городу.
People were strolling on the street.
Их останавливают 3 полицейских.
They were stopped by 3 policemen.
Ставят лицом к стене.
They were put against the wall.
И начинают обыскивать.
And they start searching those people.
Я дождался, пока они закончат.
So after they finish doing that,
отпустят их.
After they leave them,
и спрашиваю, а зачем вы это делаете?
I asked them, why do you do that?
Ну, это же незаконно.
That's illegal.
Они говорят, это люди-иммигранты, и их нужно контролировать.
And the police said to me that those are immigrants and you have to control them.
Я говорю, а не легче их не пускать просто, ну не впускать в страну, просто не давать им пересекать границу, и все, не надо никого будет контролировать.
And this is very ridiculous. I mean, you could not let those people in the country, and that is it. You won't have to control them afterwards.
Зачем госпоже Меркель иммигрант?
So why would, for instance, Chancellor Merkel need immigrants?
Много вопросов.
So there are a lot of question marks.
Зачем нарушать права граждан, когда их можно просто не пускать в страну?
Why would you violate human rights when in the first place it is enough not to let them in the country?
То есть, если ты знаешь заранее, что тебе придется нарушать их права, зачем ты их пускаешь в страну?
If you know that you will have to violate their rights, why would you let them in the country?
Раньше у спецслужб, у прокуратуры не было никаких технических средств контроля, возможностей, спутников, интернета, ничего не было.
So before, the prosecutors and other special agencies, they didn't have those means that they have today.
И все работало.
And everything would work perfectly without the advanced technology that we have today.
Сегодня ты приходишь в прокуратуру, первый вопрос, знаете, какой вам задают?
And when today you come to the prosecutor's office, the first question that you're asked,
Есть видео?
do you have a video tape?
Разве в законе сказано, что должно быть видео?
I mean, does the constitution of the country tell that in order to have an evidence, you have to have a videotape?
То есть все сводится к какому-то странному абсурду.
So everything is becoming totally absurd.
И вот этот абсурд называется безопасностью.
And that absurd is titled a security at this stage.
Ну и в продолжение диалога моего друга Dwight'а.
And to continue the speech of my friend Dwight Wilson.
я начал изучать протесты в Соединенных Штатах Америки.
I have started studying the protests that are happening in the United States of America.
И собираюсь сейчас снимать фильм,
And I'm about to make a documentary about that.
который называется «Коктейль для обезьян».
And it's going to be titled A Cocktail for Monkeys.
Да. Так вот, у меня уже собралось достаточное количество материалов,
So by now I have enough amount of materials
чтобы доказательно изложить в фильме, что эти протесты очень хорошо организованы.
to demonstrate in the documentary that those protests are really well organized ones.
То есть учебники,
They have textbooks,
тренинги,
trainings,
специальные лагеря подготовки,
special training camps.
координация деятельности через социальные сети и пейджеры,
They coordinate every single step through social media and other means of communication.
прямое руководство и, так сказать, отдача распоряжений.
They directly manage and command every single entity.
И посмотрите на Америку, что там творится.
And now if we look broadly at what is happening in the US,
На языке военных это называется диверсия.
in military language, that would be called diversion or sabotage.
То есть, по сути своей, как бы все говорят, что люди с черным цветом кожи защищают свои права.
I mean, people say that people with black skin, they are trying to protect their rights,
Это возмутительная ложь.
which is a lie.
Поведение американских полицейских, оно никогда не отличалось демократичностью и соблюдением прав человека.
Because behavior of American policemen was never distinguished by the fact that they would basically watch human rights and respect them.
И когда мы говорим о Соединенных Штатах Америки, мне вообще очень сложно назвать эту страну после ее посещения демократической страной.
And after visiting that country, it's very hard for me to tell that US is a democratic country.
США — это иллюзия демократии, там никогда не было демократии, там это диктатура капитала.
Because in the US, it was always an illusionary democracy because that is, in fact, it is a dictatorship of capital.
И Соединенные Штаты Америки — это, я бы сказал так, главное место в мире, где генерируется вся ложь этого мира.
And the United States of America is an epicenter that generates the illusions that exist in this world.
Мой друг, профессор Стивен Бест, посчитал, какое количество раз президент Соединенных Штатов Америки врет в неделю.
My friend and colleague, Dr. Stephen Best from Texas, he calculated, he researched how people calculated how many lies Trump tells per day.
Это впечатляющая цифра.
And that was an impressive number.
Да, и представьте себе, что после этого эта нация и города Соединенных Штатов Америки почему-то должны находиться в безопасности.
And how come after that, rhetorically speaking, how cities in the US would be safe? I mean, this is a rhetorical question.
И в заключение я хотел бы как бы сказать, что, наверное, пока вот эта опасность для всех выгодна капиталу,
And to conclude, while the dangerousness in the cities is advantageous for the capital,
пока пандемия является инструментом зарабатывания денег,
while the pandemics are the tools for generating money
и решение глобальных политических вопросов,
and solving global political issues,
пока люди желают быть обманутыми, находиться в неведении,
while people desire to be deceived and live in the illusion,
это будет продолжаться бесконечно и закончится очень печально.
this is going to be continued forever, and the end would be not a happy one.
Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you for attending.
Great, thanks, dear Professor Maltsev, for your speech. Please, Eduardo Almeida, you may start.
Thank you very much. I think this second topic is very, very relevant when we consider that the different categories of risk implicates in different effects or different implications for different people, right? So one thing that we living in a big city have to have present is the fact that depending on my own vulnerability, it will be easier or harder for me to live in a city. If you see the dependencies that we have nowadays with energy or water, pumping, infrastructure, communications, it's becoming very relevant day after day for cities, for people living in cities. If I am a handicapped person in a wheelchair, living like it, was said in the beginning in New York, for instance, in one of those buildings, I would be very much concerned about power supply. So if I have to go in the third floor every day, returning from my work, and I need elevator to bring me up, probably I will make sure that energy is very often provided and uninterrupted in this place. Differently from a normal, regular, healthy or citizen, right? So how often can energy supply be interrupted in a city like New York or the one that I live in, São Paulo in Brazil? So it is a matter of connection and supply. So if you see nowadays, all the devices are connected to the internet. I will, just bring about the fact that the internet and communications are becoming more and more relevant these days. All the devices are connected through internet. So the advent of the Internet of Things brought about a very big concern to policymakers. So how do I protect my assets that will provide energy to cities, that will pump water into the house? So how am I dependable? How much am I dependable of public services to survive in a big city? So those things brings also another relevant point about dependability. So if I am someone who depends on government and depends on local institutions to have my own food provisioning, my own water pumping, my own security, I may need to make sure that my local authorities, my local government authorities, they have clearly defined public roles, and that will be observed in order to provide this basic service to the citizens. So when we talk about elderly people or we talk about vulnerable people, like the one that I mentioned, right? So how much they can survive in a city where chaos and where, looting, where, riots are in place? Do we have the right public services to provide these people the level of security they need to survive? So of course, I'm bringing this up because the feeling, the sensation of security and risk is very personal, right? So if I live in a city where I have a risk management officer and I do have, in a very clear and democratic way, the risk assessment, clearly published in my webpage, and I can see, not only the weather forecast for the day, but I want to see where are the, the looting happening, where are the crimes happening more often, what is the authority or what are the authorities doing to prevent and to protect citizens from this, arbitrary actions from marginal people. This is all about risk management. So the number one question that I bring to this discussion, to this topic now, is whether a city that is considered a safe city have or not have a clear policy around risk management. We're talking about natural disasters. So, but there are more than that. If we see what happened in Lebanon, early last month. So how much is the authority, the local authority, capable of providing citizens not only, information, but actions to prevent what happened in Lebanon, right? So when you see that they were, storing, they had a warehouse full of nitrate, full of explosive devices there, that was just a matter of time to happen. But you know what? We don't have in many places a local authority that is capable to provide this vision and to protect citizens. I know, this happens, and of course it's easy to talk now because it happened. However, I'm afraid that there are other places, including my own town, where we may have situations like that could be prevented if we have a strong and robust risk assessment that will be able to provide this vision that throw light to the risks that the society have and the society may face in the short term, right? Now, I just want to finish with a comment regarding technology. You know, I do believe that technology can provide a big help to mitigate risks in the big cities. One of the studies that we had in the region in Latin America was around lighting. So the more light you have in a town, in a city, the less crimes you have. There is a direct connection between the two. So making sure that we are illuminating the places, the railroad, the roads, the streets, that we have, you know, we don't have shadow zones. Somehow monitoring with cameras. It also helps depending on the place you are, but it's just punctual, just isolated actions that might be underneath a more complete approach of public safety. Again, risk assessments, public safety is very personal. It depends on how much I am vulnerable to a certain risk. If I live in a city like San Francisco, for example, where you have seismic issues, the risk for me is different from a person living on the streets here in São Paulo, a beggar, you know, that will be more vulnerable to food supplies, right, to water supplies. So I think societies and cities must have present the fact that risk is very personal, first, and the second, that having a risk management bureau or office should be, you know, an obligation of every mayor, every city, to provide less risks to its citizens. So this is what I had to share, Vitalii. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Eduardo, for your speech and your opinion. And let me ask to Dwight Wilson to follow this discussion.
Thank you. So what I would like to talk about a little bit about today is the supply chain that supplies our big cities. We have, of course, you know, we want to do everything more green in dealing with climate and cleaner, safer, all of that within our cities. But our populations are very much at risk. You take one thing out of the supply chain, whether you're delivering food, water, utilities, sheltering people, and dealing with the disasters, man-made disasters or natural disasters. Like right now, we're getting ready to be hit by a hurricane down on the Texas coast, which is displacing a lot of people during the COVID-19 event. So how are we housing these people? How are we medically treating these people? What are we doing? With the social media and the chaos and the riots that's going on also, it demonstrates to me how quickly mobs can affect the city as well. For security, working in a security company, we have to constantly be aware of these risks and what's going on. Our grocery stores typically only have 3 days supply of food. Most Americans go shopping at least once a week or every other week. So food supplies can get gone very quickly, depending upon what's happening, as well as water. All of those kind of things are just, it's so interconnected within our cities. You remove one piece of the puzzle and there goes your house of cards. So it's very much an illusion a lot of times. So the threats to the city, I definitely see. The more people you have, like Dallas-Fort Worth, where I live, we have 7 million people. But if you look at a city like New York City or Los Angeles, you've got a lot more people. In New York City, you're dealing with a lot of subways and people living on top of each other, very much interconnected. It's just an illusion, and it can be the safety and security of our cities can very easily just fall apart, you know. So that's definitely something I think that we have to consider moving forward with anything that we're doing. As a security officer, I'm constantly aware of threats. Part of what my job is to prepare and look at and problem solve threats, whether it's to my facility or whether it's to the people that I work for, my clients, and as well as myself. So it's everything that is going on currently has definitely changed the way we are doing business and how we're having to look at the situation that we're dealing with, especially in the bigger cities. That's and with technology too. It is also interconnected. It's kind of like instead of a ladder, it's a circle. Everything is, you pull out one piece of the puzzle, you no longer have that complete circle, you know? Yeah, that's about all I have. That's about all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Great, thanks, dear Dwight. Thank you for your opinion. And please, Professor Ryan Bishop, you may start.
Yes. I just have a few very quick thoughts. One is, if we're thinking about categories of risk in cities, the usual groups are in greater danger than ever. The poor, the marginalized, the exploited, the weak, the hungry, the elderly, children, the infirm, the disenfranchised. But I think the trick is perhaps to flip the relative status of endangerment, the relative status of risk. Just as all bombing of a city is actually suicide bombing, that is, all bombing is fundamentally suicidal. The dynamic that imperils the most vulnerable among us also imperils us, even if seemingly profiting or flourishing momentarily in short-term calculations. A clear movement away from consistent, unchecked economies of extraction and inequitable wealth and resource distribution that have exacerbated the current crises of ecology and disease is needed. Developing economies of contribution and the cultivation of care might alter our understanding of cities as operating within larger systems of a biosphere that allows us to live. As the recently deceased philosopher Bernard Stiegler said, urban dwellers and humanity generally face the challenge of formalizing and bringing into play at the level of the planetary economy new theoretical models equal to the real situation. A global threat caused by the global economy and its encounter with the biosphere, which in the near future can turn into a kind of necrosphere, a sphere of the dead, as a result of the irrational and unreasonable exploitation of what has been called the technosphere, to return to the various discussions about technology, social media, and cyber precarity that has gone through a number of the discussions from numerous people tonight. The ever-pressing demands of biogeochemical engineering for urban welfare, outside of the standard measures of value as extractive profit, but as contributory profit and value, just might secure our continued perch. We can stratify society and urban space as we have for a long time. But what is the continued cost of that? It is a cost that we all pay now, and we are currently paying in coin and currency of climate crises and pandemic, with economies wrecked by greed, speculation, deterritorialization, extraction, and plunder. What we're experiencing now is a precursor of worse conditions to come. A shift toward understanding fully how deeply entangled and interdependent at all scales the precarity and continuity of life are within our now very fragile biosphere will benefit all of us, not just a few. So an understanding of this in its rounded complexity and making the political adjustments accordingly seems urgently needed and has been for well over half a century. We've known all of this for a very long time. The systematic erasure of privilege at any and all costs, and this is largely at the diminished welfare of other humans, animals, plants, soil, the land, and other cities is the absolute demand of the moment. That would be a city we should target, not for destruction, of course, or control or exploitation, but to target as aspiration, as contribution. Trying to get back to normal or trying to get back to the business as usual makes us bad ancestors. Thanks a lot.
Great, thanks, Professor Bishop, for your speech. And the discussion will be continued by Avi Nardia.
Hi. I want again to start with a story. And the story is about a mathematics professor that came to some village and he gave a lecture. And when he finished the lecture, the professor, he see an old man on a tractor and he see that one of the wheels of his car is missing. And the wheels sit on 4 screws, and you know, like 4 screws, and then you have the wheel. And the thieves, they took the wheel, they took also the screws. So the old man tried to help him, and the guy told him, I'm a professor, I know how to think. And the old man say, look, it's not a big problem. You have a spare tire, so you can put your spare tire. But the professor is very angry and tried to be even insulting to the old man. And he told him, yeah, but where I get the 4 screws? And then the old man told him, you have 3 other wheels. And if you take 1 screw from each wheel, you will have 4 wheels that in each of them you have 3 screws. And you can keep driving to the first place to fix it. And this is about common sense. And sometimes we think about things without simplicity. And I look about life always, that's why I also say I teach practical martial arts. Everything I do is try to be practical. And I want to tell you another story. Is about one of my students is very rich and he used to fly me to teach him martial art. And he always told me, because I told him, what is your goal? You don't want to study Japanese martial art or this. What is your goal? Why you want to study something very practical? And he told me, I'm very rich, and one day if zombie will attack, and the first thing I thought, the guy is very weird, zombie. And I even don't know what is a zombie, so he sent me to see the movie Walking Dead. And it reminded me another seminar in the US, when I started teaching a lot of people in the US, and they came to shooting seminars, martial arts seminars, knife fighting seminars, and in the end to survival seminars. And I remember that they always have like shelters, like some kind of a commando they have in the wood, shelters, they want to know how to put traps, how to slaughter animals. And this back us to the people that really, in the city we depend on electricity. In the village we don't. Many people still don't have in the village electricity. They don't care about internet. They don't care about, they even will maybe not know about Corona if they live without electricity. So we lose a lot of our skills. I call them the caveman skill or the primitive skills from how to really, you know, like when you go to the supermarket, you see the chicken, but the chicken did not start in the supermarket, it started in the village. And a lot of people will lost the skill of how to make a cheese, how to get eggs from the chicken, all of those primitive skills. And this is why I believe that farmers will have a better survival if we really go into a chaos, like disaster. And we are not. And in my opinion, from what I can see, because I'm an army person, I see it again like a simple guy. Like Titanic was mentioned, and I always tell to my students, Titanic was built by experts, while the Noah Ark by amateur. Sometimes amateur with a good logic and common sense to analyze what happened. And there's no virus that want to kill you. If you're dead, the virus is dead. So it's impossible that the nature will develop a virus to kill you. And I look about the epidemia, and I call it pandemia. And the pandemia, I look at this again like a big terror attack and how I will deal with a multi-terror attack or a biological war. I don't say that it is, but this is how I will approach it. And I had an argument with a friend, and he told me, you know, you really give those people like a respect that they had some kind of a plan. And I don't want to admit that they really just might be idiots, because when you see governmental people, they even don't know, they go on TV and they try to demo how to put the mask and they put it here or here. And it makes me laugh. Like I said, those people cannot put a mask, which a 6-year-old can do, and they're going to protect me. I'm going to depend on those governmental people. That's ridiculous. And we talked about risk management, and maybe in the plan, you want actually that you will be depend more and more on the government, because you will be depend your food or your benefit from the government. Without this, you will not be able to eat. I mean, we lost the job, we lost everything. How are we going to pay even the bills? So we will depend on the unemployment, or we will be depend on government to give us things. We can see also that why I don't think that this will go fast, but because I see things always like a plan, then you decide the strategy. It could be like before we talked about different terrorism, and in this strategy we're using the pandemia as a terror attack, a strategy, and then the tactic will be again to use fear and to become to take our human rights, to put like for example, like to put a face recognition camera. So now my governments know exactly I walk in these streets, I drink in this bar, I like these books. Everything is actually surveillance. And I see it as a global war between China to the US. I believe that the US see the China in the last 20, 30 years, because I remember myself, student in Japan, going to China, it was like disaster. And today, going to China, you can see Shanghai is like new Manhattan. Everything is new. And the US was slipped and depend on power and submarines and big weapons. And suddenly Chinese took over the world. They took all the electronics, they took all the market is Chinese. So now we need to make everyone to hate Chinese. That's why you see the Chinese virus. Who says that the virus is Chinese? Why that virus need to start in Wuhan, that in Wuhan you have a lab for bio war? I mean, that's really looks to me not right. It looks to me like a sabotage. But what I see as the risk, because again, there's the big thing and what is concerned to each of us. And I see that we're going to lose jobs. Every day, more and more people will lose jobs. That will lead to more suicide. The whole social distance will create very big problems as a society. I see from the political thing that we are going to use human rights. Police is very aggressive on their own brothers or their own people. And we will see more riots to the point that it will risk the governments. And then the solutions will come, because they don't want a French Revolution. They just want to have control. And I think that we have a few more months and everything will be finished and there will be a solution to the virus. And even if it's real, we will just need to admit that we need to study to live with it. There's no other way. And I can see more murders, more domestic violence, more robberies, because it's impossible that you will have and other people not. My friend Carlos Newton is a great champion of MMA and UFC. And when we teach poor people around the world, he said one of the most smart things. He said to me, you have to love those kids, same like your own son. And if you don't love them, your son is going to meet them when they come to robbery there. So you might have money or Bill Gates, but you know what? if the world is going in chaos, they are in a more dangerous because they have something to lose when the poor people have nothing to lose.
Thank you, Mr. Nardia. And I want to give the floor for a few comments to Professor Maltsev.
60 секунд вашего времени.
Just the 60 seconds of your attention.
Вот обратите внимание на выступление моего коллеги.
Please pay attention to the speech of my colleague, Avi Nardia.
Любому военному человеку совершенно понятно, что это искусственная пандемия.
When it comes to pandemic, to any military army person, it is very obvious that the pandemic is a set up one, is an artificial situation.
Обратите внимание, почему тогда ни одному политику это непонятно.
Pay attention why none of the elected officials and politicians would understand
Все
this.
говорят о пандемии, но никто не говорит о том, что эту пандемию создали искусственно, и она, существует в виде действительно биологического оружия.
I mean, all people just keep on speaking about pandemics, and it does exist in the form of bioweapon.
И ни один человек не написал в средствах массовой информации: ребята, давайте разберемся, кроме внезапной возникшей пандемии от летучих мышей, есть еще какие-то версии?
And not many people did speak up telling that, except the versions that the pandemic came from the bats and they infected some kind of pangolin meat. Are there any other versions to the pandemic situation?
То есть, и вы помните, когда была конференция по пандемии, мы говорили о том, что определенные ученые сказали, что любая другая версия не научна.
And if you remember, in the previous conference, which was titled Post-Apocalyptic Life Era, some people said that any other version except the pangolin or bats being the source is not scientific.
Да, то есть она не научна. Раз она не научна, значит, она не может рассматриваться.
And since other versions are considered by many to be not scientific, it means that we cannot examine or analyze them.
И только человеку, который совершенно лишен какого-либо способности к анализу,
And people that have no capacity for analysis,
не понимает, кто это все создал.
he would never understand who or what have created this situation.
Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, dear Professor Maltsev. And our discussion will be finished by Professor Maxim Lepskiy. You're welcome, dear Professor Lepskiy.
Спасибо за предоставление слова. Я хочу... Мне было очень интересно слышать профессора Бишопа, поскольку категоризация риска и определение, собственно, тех категорий людей, которые подвержены этому риску, мне представляется очень важным.
Since Professor Lepskiy actually believes that risks categorization and classification of the notions and the level of risks, moreover realizing which group of people are more affected by risk, this is a very important phenomenon for Professor Lepskiy viewpoint.
В психологии риска мы обычно изучаем некоторые важные моменты.
Speaking about the technologies of encountering the risks, this is the area that shows the most significant aspects to be known and researched more.
Один из этих факторов является бюджет времени человека.
One of the most fundamental facts is the time budget of the person.
И сейчас у людей все больше бюджет времени увеличивается в сторону диджитализации и информационных технологий.
And today, speaking about just an ordinary man, we should say that his time budget is increasing towards the digitalization of his life. I mean, the more and more he's involved in information space or environment.
Естественно, и риски увеличиваются в том бюджете времени, где больше находится человек.
And of course, the risk ratio increases right in the sector the person spends more time in.
Второй момент, который мы изучаем в категориях риска, это прежде всего людей, которые теряют ориентацию в тех или иных ситуациях.
The second aspect that Professor Lepskiy is researching concerning the time budget is the situations or the reasons that actually disrupt people and make them go disorientated. So people are disorientated in certain environment. Why is it so? And this is pretty risky.
Включение, еще один важный аспект, это включение в группу и в социальную общность, соответственно, и потерю включения.
And by speculating more about these risky situations, we also mean that certain people are falling apart, they're falling away from social groups. They are trying to become the part of social group, but they cannot.
И еще один важный фактор, на наш взгляд, это средства, которые обеспечивают дееспособность человека.
One more significant option concerning Professor Lepskiy's viewpoint is the thing that actually maintains and embodies and helps the person to survive, get on, and live his life.
Естественно, в глобальной пандемии были использованы все эти 4 фактора.
And all these 4 factors, all these aforementioned 4 factors were applied and used artificially in organizing pandemic.
То есть в информационной части тиражировались одни и те же сообщения для привлечения внимания и переключения мировоззрения.
So starting from the media, we should say that the media environment actually switched on and switched off certain focus of attention of people in order to make them disorientated in their personal viewpoints and even in their religious viewpoints.
Принадлежность к группе сжималась до уровня семьи при обсервации или ограничении передвижения.
Secondly, speaking about such consequences, speaking about the observation consequences or the consequences of being cut, people felt more lonely because they couldn't communicate with their usual groups, and the groups actually decreased in their numbers.
И наоборот, расширение до массовой толпы, когда этот процесс утихает.
And
То, что произошло в Америке, и то, что происходит сейчас в Беларуси.
however, there is, let me say, the controversial consequence, like if everything happens vice versa. I mean, if certain things are stopping, we see the increase of involvement of people into huge mass doing certain things like riots we see today in the USA and a certain situation we foresee in Belarus right now.
То же самое связано и со средствами дееспособности. Не включение в информационные технологии означает прежде всего либо детей, которые еще не включены, либо старшее поколение, которые уже не включены.
Moreover, speaking about the class of active people who are involved in informative technological environment, we should say that there are certain people who are out of this aspect. I mean, they're not involved yet because they are either just small children or they are pretty old and they cannot get involved in this information space.
И то, что мы обсуждали с моим коллегой Олегом Викторовичем, что под угрозой часто оказывается прежде всего такая категория, как стиль жизни.
Moreover, Professor Lepskiy would discuss a certain aspect with his colleague Dr. Maltsev, and this aspect is the way the person is disrupted according to his style of living or standard of living. He cannot continue his lifestyle just the way he wants it.
Если раньше в макросоциологии мы изучали, что революции происходят в столице, а войны начинаются на окраине, то сейчас мы видим, что эти процессы охватывают значительно большие площади.
Before, in macrosociology, there was such a concept claiming that actually all the riots and all the revolutions start in the center of the city. Meanwhile, the wars begin on the outskirts. However, today we see that actually everything's getting mixed.
Потому что часто революция происходит еще в мировоззрении.
Because actually speaking about revolution, revolution is not only something physical. Usually revolution concerns the viewpoints of people.
Поэтому мне представляется, что изменение ситуации с пандемией, естественно, достаточно понятная экономическая составляющая связана с выгодополучателями.
And Professor Lepskiy believes that the global change concerning the pandemic threat and its consequences actually targets certain economic interests of certain people who organized this situation. I mean, the main idea is all about profit. It's all about certain economic reasons of certain people who are interested in prolonging this situation more and more.
И чаще всего сейчас это высокотехнологические компании, связанные с информационными процессами и информационным бизнесом.
And who are involved in this process? Professor Lepskiy believes certain high technological companies, I mean companies who actually can operate all these information technologies and spread and scope all these pieces of information.
Но эти процессы еще требуют изучения. Спасибо за внимание.
However, concerning the processes, we believe that all these processes are actually not researched enough yet. That's why it would be a great idea to continue this research. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Great, thanks, dear Professor Lepskiy, for your speech. Let me thank, dear ladies and gentlemen, to all speakers, all colleagues, and all experts. Our online panel is about to be over now. Several weeks later, conference committee will prepare their resolution and the collected papers book of this conference, and you can find it for free on the website of conference and Google Books, and each of our speakers and participants will be notified. The news on the media will be also notified by organizing committee. Thank you all for your contribution, for your participation. To see you soon.